So it's interesting. We go back and forth all the time on tokenization theory, and especially with respect to securities law. And we have this ongoing battle about whether there is such a thing as a non-security token. And so I'm going to be teasing him from the stage because we're going to go back and forth. Also, just another question. Who's seen me speak at another one of these conferences and sat through my long explanation of how you can tell whether or not something is a security? No, some people. That's it. Good. This one's a little bit different. It's kind of a thought experiment that I want to engage the group in. Just real quick, I'm Gordon. You know who I am. I'm not going to do the long intro. This is security token models for 2019 and beyond, a thought experiment. So you can do a thought experiment with me. The original Einstein was famous for his thought experiments, so I thought I would copy what he was doing. And by the way, if you want to copy the deck, just message me on Facebook or LinkedIn or find me, and I'm happy to share. All right, that's about me, blah, blah, blah. I have to give these disclosures because I'm a US attorney. I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. Don't break the law. Make sure you pay your taxes, and don't piss off the US, or else you'll end up like Noriega, arrested and in jail. And my wife got me this cup. It's like, don't confuse your Google search with my law degree. So, okay. Who in the audience has participated in ICO, either as part of a team, initiating it, investing in it? Right. And who, this is a loaded question, has participated in a STO, or security token offering? Really? Okay. Now there's a different proportion there, obviously. When I became involved in this, the big thing was utility tokens and ICOs. Then the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, started sending out a whole bunch of subpoenas, and everyone got nervous and fled to Ibiza. And the ICOs kind of dropped down. And I think what we're seeing is the beginning of security token offerings, but the volume of STOs, to the extent they exist at all, is nowhere near the volume of ICOs a couple years ago. And there's some question about whether or not it's going to replace ICOs, whether it's going to exist in tandem with ICOs, or what's its role in this universe. So this is where Pavel and I kind of go back and forth. I personally strongly believe, and the SEC supports me, that the concept of a non-security token, a utility token, is valid. You can have something that's valuable, tradable, has function, and is not a security, even if people are buying it for the purpose of it going up in value. Likewise, you can have, obviously, a token that's a security. The thing I see bandied about ICOs and utility tokens is FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Who's heard of FUD? The more fun one is FOMO, which is fear of missing out. And I have a very strong feeling that a lot of people that are pursuing STOs have FOMO because they missed out on the ICOs, and they missed out on selling Bitcoin in 20,000, and they're pissed off, and now they want to make their money the second time around. And that's, I believe, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, who said that Bitcoin was a fraud. Of course, he said that before he came out with his own crypto coin, so I don't really give him any credit at all. So I want you to join me in this thought experiment. Again, this is a little different from what I normally do. I want you to ponder with me about the nature of securities, the nature of tokens, and the future of security token offerings. And what models can we see now coming into existence, and what's going to show up later. And I'm going to throw this out to the crowd. Again, this is different from my usual presentation. I strongly assert, and you'll see me do it here, that in every country's law, especially in the US, the term security is a defined term. It does not mean what people on Facebook says it means. Okay, it doesn't mean what the SEC says it means. It's a defined term. It's written into codified law. So it can't mean everything. There's many things that aren't security. But I've recently come to the view that the definition of a security is changing. Okay, it is changing. It's changing globally, and it's changing in response to tokenization. It's the most interesting thing I've seen. Okay, so this is sort of a rehash back to basics slide, if you like. All right, again, in the US, and this applies everywhere, every country that has an active securities market has something equivalent to this. Security isn't some vague term, it's a defined word. The core of US securities law is the Securities Act of 1933, and it's a very helpful document because in Section 2, Section 1 is, this is the Securities Act of 1933, great. Section 2 is definitions. The very first definition in Section 2, Section 2A1, is the definition of a security. In other words, you don't need to guess, it's there. Wow, that's strangely clear. Now, this looks like a whole mess of text, and it's hard to get through, but it's just listing off commonly acknowledged forms of securities. And again, I'm happy to share this deck with people. And the more exotic ones are at the bottom, but the beginning is pretty clear. The term security means any note, stock, treasury stock, swap, bond, debenture. It's mostly known forms of securities. I mean, everyone knows that a share of stock is a security. It represents equity in a company. Everyone knows that a bond or a note represents debt. I mean, those are pretty clearly investment interests and securities. And then you list all this exotic stuff like straddles, options, calls, but 9 times out of 10, you're not getting down there. And in the old days, you used to have a certificate representing your equity, your shares in the company, and you would even have a certificate representing your bonds, meaning the money that a company owed you. So security is a defined term, and the big chunk of this paragraph here is just listing off common enumerated types of securities. What most people in the industry, they know it's a security. Where the trouble and the complexity comes in is with investment contract. What the heck is an investment contract? I don't know. Well, actually, I do know. We'll go into it. So 2A1 has 2 broad categories of what makes up securities. There's the traditional known kind, bond, share, stock, whatever, and then there's investment contract. Okay, and just to give you a preview, I'm going to break it all down for you. Okay, so we have traditional security types, and we also have this sort of bucket or catch-all category called investment contract. Because clever people, when they want to sell something that's like a security but do not want to comply with securities laws, they don't call it a stock or bond or debenture or note. They'll call it, a token. I mean, does anyone see the word token there? You do? You're very imaginative. Yeah. Okay, it's not there. So all you have to do is call your stock a token, and it's not a security, right? Does everyone believe that? No. Because you have this category of investment contract. I now call them accidental securities, like accident like this. Okay? They're agreements or contracts that people sold that they either did not realize that they were selling a security, or they purposely misnamed something to be like, oops, I didn't know that was a security, or they're trying to kind of play around. But investment contracts are a broad category, and they catch everything that doesn't fall within the traditional categories. And they've been very applicable recently because people are looking at their tokens and trying to decide, whether my token's not a stock, is it an investment contract? Well, the definition of an investment contract was, even though it's funny, it's named in the 33 Act, but it wasn't actually defined until a famous 1946 US Supreme Court case called Howey. And Howey came up with this 4-pronged test that lets you know whether or not something is an investment contract. I have hour-long YouTube videos on this. Okay, I'm not going to bore you with this now. Okay, I'll bore you with it on YouTube. Okay, but if you want to understand how you apply the Howey test, like down to the little whatever, and save $1 million per hour on legal fees, go watch a video. Okay, but all 4 of those elements must be true for something to be an investment contract and therefore security. By the way, that's W.C. Howey. That poor guy probably didn't realize he was selling securities, and now everyone in the world in 2019 is using this poor guy's name to curse the SEC and get angry that their token maybe is a security. I mean, look at his expression. He probably knew what was going to happen. Okay, so here's a handy little graphic to help everyone understand the world, everything in the world. Everything in the world is on this chart, okay? This is what I call the traditional conceptual model of securities. This is all based on section 2A1. There's securities land, and there's not securities land. Does everyone agree that everything on the planet is either a security or is not a security? Is there any other category? Usually when I do this to like Ukrainian audiences, some guy's a smart ass and like challenging these basic ideas. No sarcastic people, really, in Ukraine? Okay, that's weird. Okay, like everyone in Ukraine is sarcastic. Okay, so you have securities land and you have not securities land, right? In securities land, this is just going over what we just discussed. There's two broad categories of securities. There's the named traditional types, stocks, shares, notes, bonds, is everything that was in that list. Then you have your investment contracts, what I call the accidental securities. Now, they're not going to fit in these normal categories. And all these weird things can end up as investment contracts because someone can take something totally normal like a pencil, to use my example from other presentations, and add something stupid like dividends to it and turn that nice pencil into a security. I mean, if you sell pencils and the pencil gives dividends from the pencil company, like $1 per year out of their earnings, you just turned that pencil into a security. You're also freaking stupid because now you're going to be hauled in front of the SEC. Well, Howie, poor guy, was selling orange groves, orange orchards, orange trees, but he wasn't just selling them. He was selling management contracts plus a percentage of the profit. Well, guess what? He worked his special magic and turned that into that. Okay, bad Howie. All right, so all these weird things can turn into securities that you wouldn't expect. Orange groves, i.e. orange orchards. Whiskey warehouse receipts. There's actually a case on that, okay? You would never guess it. Payphone contracts can be securities. And something we'll talk about in a second, which is a pre-functional utility token. That's where everyone got busted with their ICOs, and I'll explain it in a second. The pre-functional utility tokens. Now, here's securities land. And if you want to get over the border from securities land to the safety of everything else, I think we can agree that there's many things on the planet that aren't securities. There's commodities, there's licenses, there's land, there's puppy dogs, there's kitty cats, there's goldfish. Okay, those things are not securities. And functional utility tokens are not securities. They're just software licenses. Okay? So unless you add something more, like a dividend, like a voting on an enterprise or a claim on assets, those things are not securities. Okay, so this is the traditional conceptual model of securities. But this is beginning to fall apart. I gotta admit it, it's beginning to fall apart. The world is changing. And so what changed it? Software and tokenization and token D, 8 securities law. Okay, so let's talk about this zone, the pre-functional utility token, because anyone here who's interested in doing an ICO, a blockchain project, or anything with tokens needs to be aware of this. It's one thing if you're selling a token and it's a security and you know it's a security. That's easy. You just comply with securities law. Right? Fine. What happens if you do like what Vitalik did with Ethereum, which is you go, hey everyone, I have an idea, but it's not working yet. Send me your Bitcoin. I'll give you some non-functional Ether tokens on my non-functional platform in exchange for that Bitcoin. I'm going to use that Bitcoin that you gave me, or fiat that you gave me, to build a platform. And then once that platform is functional, the tokens will be functional. You bought them for super cheap. I love you, my customers. Now you can use my platform with all these tokens you bought. Now, how many people actually bought Ether planning at a discount in the beginning, planning to actually use it on the platform? You are good souls. I can see the halos above your head. Okay, rumor has it that some people bought those tokens because they intended to resell them at a profit later. Rumor has it. By the way, is my American sarcasm going over this audience, or are you with me? That's okay? Okay, Anastasia tells me. That? Okay. Good. So, yes, it is a beautiful extension of the crowdfunding idea. This ICO where you sell pre-functional tokens, use the money, build the platform, and those early loyal customers got those tokens cheap and can now use the platform. But the SEC and everyone else has a point that probably the motivation, the understanding the parties was they weren't really buying those tokens cheap in order to use them later. They were buying them so they could resell them at a profit. And lots of people, lots of companies engaging in ICOs are not innocent. They were selling these pre-functional tokens to people and marketing them for the purposes of saying, hey, if you buy these now, they'll go up in value, we can resell them at a profit. Again, I'm not going to beat Howie to death, but one of the core tests is with an expectation of profit. If you start giving your client or your buyer an expectation of profit in your tokens, that's beginning to look like a security. Okay, and I'm not being very nice to them, but this Munchie ICO, the one I call idiots, they actually put in their white paper and their marketing materials, hey, our tokens will go up in value, but they're not securities because it's a platform where we can do things. I'm like, oh my God, people. So yeah, don't be a Munchie. Now, once a platform is functional, and if you sell the tokens then, the global consensus is those are not securities. It's only when they're pre-functional that they're securities because the investment is more speculative. You're more, I think I got half an hour. Oh, 40 minutes. Dude, I flew all the way in from LA. Okay. Now, things have changed. Probably gotta let me ride. Things have changed. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, is made up of 5 commissioners. One of them is Commissioner Hinman, okay? And he gave a presentation called When Howie Met Gary Plastic. And he talked about Ethereum, because Ethereum, quite obviously, was a security when it was initially issued. It was just like Munchie. It was pre-functional. People bought it with an expectation of profit. So why isn't Vitalik in jail? Because we didn't want to mess with Switzerland is a real reason. But another reason is he came out there and off the record, but to the public at Yahoo, said, even if Ethereum was initially a security when issued because it wasn't functional and people bought it with an expectation of profit, the platform is now sufficiently decentralized and developed so that the thing changed from being a security into being a utility token. Okay, that is legal alchemy. That's magic. Never in the history of humanity has a security, because of just natural use, turned into a non-security over the course of time because it got decentralized. Like, this is new on the planet. So this line is beginning to break down because you can start here and migrate over here. The traditional model is breaking now. I wonder if you can migrate from a non-security token to a security token by mistake. How do you know? And doesn't that possibly make everything a security or nothing a security? No way. Sorry. Okay, now, Mark Andreessen, I'm going to kind of loop back around and pull this together. Mark Andreessen is a very famous guy. He was the co-founder of Netscape. And Netscape, as you probably know, came up with the first browser for the internet that was user-friendly. It was friendly for guys like me. So instead of having to type code, you could actually just browse to websites. And then he went off and started Andreessen Horowitz, the VC firm, and they're very involved in crypto. And on August 20th, 2011, he wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal called Why Software is Eating the World. And the issue he was addressing was that companies like Google and Skype, when it was independent, and Amazon were trading at far greater multiples on its earnings than FedEx and American Express and US Steel and all that. And people were saying the internet was a bubble. This internet thing doesn't warrant this. It's going to go away. I wish I'd bought Amazon stock back then. And his point was, software is reworking the entire value chain, and also changing the nature of transactions. Sound like tokens a little bit? Changing the nature of transactions. For example, Netflix's recommendation engine or Amazon's recommendation engine, it's not a more efficient way of doing what happened before. It's a new thing. Okay, so these companies are uncovering value that wasn't there before. So the price to earnings multiple was worth it. Okay? And he ended up being right. Okay, so his comment was, why is software eating the world? What he missed, I feel, was what's called the last mile issue, which is if software is the center of things and the physical world that it's working with is just sort of an extension of that software, how do you get every little component of those two worlds linked together so that you can maximize the effect of the software? Pavel, this is why he wants me to keep on going. The last mile between the software world and the real world, the physical world, is tokenization. Okay, that's the middleware, that's the interface. Okay, so if you have the software world that's eating the world, that's adding value, that's reworking all your processes, and you have the actual physical world over here, the thing that supposedly matters, the medical services, the equipment, the houses you buy. These tokens that can provide a virtual interface or handle for those things is what solves the last mile problem in Andreessen's software eating the world situation. Now, one thing what Pavel was talking about is tokens have often what I refer to as a reference, or referent. Right? They refer to something else. There's some underlying base object. In a sense, they're like a derivative in securities. But they add or can add functionality to those things, such as they can add functionality to securities, or they can add functionalities to gold, for example. And they become what I call either smart and or dynamic. Smart meaning that these objects, they have no native built-in intelligence, all of a sudden become, for lack of a better word, aware of their environment, comprehending their environment because of software, because of computing power. And they become dynamic in the sense that they can react to their environment and change their form in response to their environment. Okay? So tokenization is the last mile between the software world and the physical world. Then one last comment, and then we're going to hit it to securities. Obviously, not every token has an object it's referring to. Some tokens just exist by themselves. They're not asset tokens. Okay? World of Warcraft money doesn't refer to real money. Okay? Bitcoin is not a fiat replacement. It just exists on its own. Okay? When you have a utility token that lets you access a platform, it's just a software license. And then I think Pavel made a mention that you can have an in-system accounting or record-keeping entry. That's if it's so long as it's in-world, if you like, it's not referring to something external. You can have digital collectibles like the CryptoKitties. Okay? Those things have independent existence outside of the software environment. They do not exist in the physical world. Okay, so just real quick, just a reminder, not everything is a security. All right? You have software licenses, you have commodities, you have everything else, and not everything that's a token. The mere act of tokenizing something does not turn that token into a security. And the fact that you create a token out of scratch and it has value does not make it a security. So why does it seem that everything is a security now? Here's the punchline, and then I'll call it. Okay? Tokenization is changing what it means to be a security. Okay? It is changing, just like software changes business models, tokenization is changing objects. It's changing the world that we exist in, right? Because tokens can be smart and dynamic, in other words, aware and reactive, something that was not a security, like an orange grove, can all of a sudden decide to water itself, can all of a sudden decide to order more seeds for itself, can plant and resell itself. When you start having these securities with some level of awareness, they're basically just software objects, and they start being able to do things. One of the things they may be able to do is generate an investment return. Okay? Now, it's like dropping a drop of oil in a barrel of water. You can't drink that water anymore. There's just one little drop of oil. Okay? The moment something has any securities characteristic, it's a security. It may be something else also, but it's a security. So the world of securities is expanding. Also, when you combine things in tokens, for example, suppose you combine a security, a commodity, a software license, and a CryptoKitty. Okay, and the thing's meowing at you. That combined or hybrid token is a security also. It may be those other things as well, but that token is now a security. So those other things are sort of inheriting the security status. Also, traditionally, if you own real estate, like if you own an apartment building, that's not a security, it's just an ownership interest in land, even if you're collecting rent. But when you start fractionalizing those interests, suppose you have an apartment building and you divide it into 1,000 ownership interests. Some are, and you can even get specialized, like some are paying income, some are going up in value, some are providing tax benefits. When you start fractionalizing like that and making them tradable, all of a sudden, that house, that apartment building that wasn't a security, has become a security. Okay, the realm of securities is expanding. Who knows about Brock Pierce? I know you guys do. So these things are not happening passively, okay? There is a huge securitization. Things becoming securities is the wealth source for the next century, okay? Because we're turning things that were not tradable, were not liquid, into tradable liquid assets, and we're creating new assets and new uses that have massive economic value. So people are seeing this opportunity, and they are economically incented. They are biased in a good way, in a productive way, to take things that aren't securities and to start treating them like securities. Notice his quote, and he's a very good, smart guy. Okay, he said security tokens are going to be revolutionary. They're going to give birth to a quadrillion-dollar market. That's because we're seeing the tokenization of the world's fiat money, debt, market equities, real estate, and art. Here's the question: is fiat money a security? Anyone? Is the US dollar a security? No. Right. Fiat currencies are not securities. Would tokenizing a fiat currency turn it into a security? Well, it used to be no, and it should be no, okay? But people are doing this a lot, and they're kind of talking about it like it is a security. If you take the Mona Lisa and you represent it with a token, is that a security? I mean, it shouldn't be. What if you have a million tokens, each one of which represents 1/1,000,000th of the Mona Lisa, and is tradable? Is that a security? It begins to sound like it. It's hard to say why exactly, but something about it being liquid, something about you don't have complete ownership of it. Like 1/1,000,000th of the Mona Lisa doesn't let you put the Mona Lisa in your room and enjoy it, right? It's more like a purely economic interest, okay? And we're heading into a gray zone, but the gray zone is breaking down that wall, that barrier. I'm gonna wrap up on this slide. I want to suggest that we're climbing a ladder of better concepts of securities and better concepts of security token offerings. This is a meme I stole from the internet. I'm just a big meme stealer. All right, there's 4 levels of security token enlightenment that I think we should all start thinking about. The most basic one, the little brain, is issuing these pre-functional utility tokens. All those ICOs, when they sold those pre-functional utility tokens to the public, guess what? They were doing STOs. They didn't know it, but they were selling securities to the public. So you should be proud of all those ICOs because they were really the pioneers for doing STOs. The next level up, the next level of sophistication is taking existing security types. Remember in 2A1, there was like stocks and bonds and notes. The next level up is taking those and having tokens that refer to them, that are tradable, that are usable. That's better. The next level up is what I call security tokens. It's when you have tokens that represent economic value in the issuer, but there's no underlying stock, bond, or legal instrument. Okay? That's new. That allows for a whole bunch of interesting stuff. And then I guess the final level up would be when you start granting these tokens awareness and dynamic abilities, so they can talk to each other. When you get to that point, securities are going to begin to act like the Internet of Things. You're going to have securities that can come together and form funds. You can have securities that are aware of each other and can vote. Imagine a share of stock that can vote itself based on the economic interests that it feels are relevant to its owner. So again, I'm going to hit the time limit, so I'm happy to share the deck. Questions, thoughts, controversy?